Hello, my name is Michelle Bodzeski, and I'm going to be talking to you about an infographic I made about obesity in the United States. First, I'll talk about visual potential. Visual potential is the potential for information to be conveyed visually. The visual potential of appearance refers to the use of visual elements like texture, shape, and color to represent something in the world. Visual potential of appearance can be used to inform someone what a particular object looks like, or it can use recognizable elements to quickly inform someone what something is about. In my case, I used three simple icons to represent work, exercise, and diet. Since people are already familiar with these concepts, I used simplified shapes to create easily identifiable objects that relate to these categories. To represent work, I created an icon featuring a tie and briefcase. For exercise, I created an icon featuring a bike and weight. And for diet, I created an icon featuring a burger and soda. The visual potential of location refers to the use of positioning within a display to communicate the position of things or places relative to each other. To exploit the visual potential of location, I created a choropleth map of the United States, informing readers of the prevalence of obesity within each state. I used a standard map of the United States showing where each state is located and used different shades of orange to represent different ranges of prevalence for each state. The visual potential of numbers can use a wide range of encoding to communicate values to the viewer. Common techniques of encoding include the size, amount, color, or position. To exploit the visual potential of numbers, I used the height of the blue fill within human silhouettes to convey to readers the percentage of each ethnicity that experiences obesity. The taller the blue color, the higher the prevalence of obesity within that ethnicity. Placing the silhouettes next to each other and all at the same level allowed for a very easy comparison across these four ethnicities. The visual potential of relationships refers to the potential to communicate connections between things in the real world, often using lines or groupings to convey how objects relate to each other. To exploit the visual potential of relationships, I used arrows between the icons of work, exercise, and diet to convey how these three things were interconnected and how each one affected the two others. These three icons were grouped together as factors, and this network of factors then led to a fourth node explaining the current rates of obesity. This thicker arrow is used to communicate how the complicated web between exercise, work, and diet have led to the increase of obesity within the United States. This relationship display, however, heavily relies on the text explanation to articulate the details of the relationships within this display. The visual potential of time refers to the potential to communicate differences in time using different positions on a page. To exploit the potential of time, I created a line chart spanning from 1960 to 2019, detailing the percent of adults in the US that were obese in each year. For this chart, I moved chronologically from left to right, starting in 1960 and increasing by 10 years with each interval, all the way up to 2019. Now I will talk about encoding. Encoding is the use of different visual elements like size or color to communicate information like magnitude or category. In my appearance display, I used three circles of different colors to encode three separate categories: work, exercise, and diet. Each circle is the same size to convey to readers that no category is more important than the others. All the arrows are the same length and color to show that the relationships between these three things are equally connected. In my location display, I used color to encode the percentage of adults in each state that are obese. Because these values are ranges within the same category of information, I used three different shades of the same color. This indicates to readers that each color represents different values of the same information. For the key, I used three circles the same size to show that each range was the same size. For my numbers display, I used the blue color in the fill to encode the percentage of adults within each ethnicity that are obese. The height of the fill encoded the actual value of this percentage. On the left-hand side of my relationship display is my appearance display, which I already discussed. Similar to my numbers display, I used the dark gray color to encode the percentage of adults in the US that are obese, and I used the height of the gray fill to encode the actual value of this percentage. I used a different type and color arrow for the arrow in the center to show to readers that this relationship was different than those between work, exercise, and diet. In my time display, I used circles all the same color and size, as well as data values all the same color and size, and a line the same color and thickness to tell readers these values were all conveying the same information: the percentage of adults in the US that were obese each year. For the axis, I used the same color, size, and spacing between years to show that each interval was the same length. I could have, however, made the year 1980 either larger in size or a different color to highlight the importance of this year and mark the point in time where things began to change. Now I will talk about the colors I used in my infographic. This is the color model I used for my infographic. The colors used within my model are a blue, teal, 3 shades of orange, 2 shades of gray, and beige for the background. These colors are a split complementary color palette. The 2 main colors in the infographic are a slightly more subdued version of very bright, playful colors, and the other colors and background also work to tone down the energy of the infographic as a whole. This creates an overall tone that is serious yet informal. Throughout my model, the 2 main colors, blue and orange, are placed on a light gray background to highlight a proportion the color is representing. Therefore, for several numbers displays that I created, I did the same thing, highlighting a portion of human silhouettes to represent the percentage each field corresponded to. Although my model chose to lay the bars of their bar chart on a gray background as seen on the left, I chose not to do this because it did not follow my visual language model. My color model also uses 2 separate colors for their bar chart to encode different information, total users versus a typical day. The information in my bar chart requires no encoding, and so I just used a single color, seen on the right. My model uses color to encode several times throughout the infographic, like to compare video sharing within different years or to compare total users versus a typical day. Similarly, I encoded color for several displays. I used color to encode ranges of prevalence of obesity within each state, and I also used color to encode different levels of education reached and different levels of income. No real associations were used within my color model, possibly the use of blue to represent males in their gender section, which is seen on the left. To follow this association, I also used blue for males within my gender section, seen on the right. Now I'll talk about the typography used in my infographic. This is the typography model I used for my infographic. For a majority of my model, they used Acumen Variable Concept. This is a neo-grotesque sans serif font similar to Helvetica and Universe. For titles, labels, and numbers, my model used Acumen Variable Concept Extra Condensed Medium. For actual blocks of text and commentary, the model used Acumen Variable Concept Regular. Throughout my infographic, I followed this same pattern as seen in the displays below. My model also uses decorative fonts for several titles throughout the infographic, seen above with the brown background. To match these, I tried to find fonts that emulated a similar style and feeling seen in the fonts below those of my models. Throughout my infographic, I use both precision labels and identity labels. On the left, we can see that I use precision labels to provide the precise percentages of adults that were obese in each year. On the right, I use identity labels to specify what level of income each percentage corresponds to. For nearly every graphical element in my infographic, I use annotations to provide some commentary and deeper explanation of the information presented. For example, on the left I discuss the concerns of high rates of childhood obesity, and on the right I discuss the possible factors behind the high rates of obesity in the South. I use all 3 association strategies within my infographic. On the left, I match the color of the label with the corresponding circle. On the right, I use proximity and color to label the corresponding levels of income. And on the bottom in the middle, I use leader lines to label the gender. Now I will talk about visual language within my infographic. This is the model that I use for visual language. I use 3 different lines to separate sections within my infographic. I use a thick black line to separate the header from the body of the infographic. Then I used thin black lines to separate sections within the body, and then I used a thick dashed black line to separate my sources from the rest of the infographic. I also used leader lines with a large black circle end to help label categories in the gender section. I also used some arrows once in my header and several times within my relationship display. My model also uses these lines. All of those lines match those used within my model, except the thinner black arrows used in my relationship display. These arrows, however, I tried to make emulate the thin white lines used within my model for the pie charts. My model uses circles consistently throughout the infographic, so I tried to match this throughout mine. Circles are featured in my relationship display and are also used in the income and education sections seen later in my infographic. The circles within my model are always filled, and so I did the same within my displays. My model also uses simplified human silhouettes multiple times, so in several displays I use these same icons. So the shape of a human is used in my relationship display as well as my numbers display and in the gender section at the very end. Within my model, these human silhouettes are always filled with two colors used to represent a percentage, so within my displays I only ever fill my icons with two colors and use this fill to represent a percentage. I don't use outlines much within my infographic because my model does not use outlines. In one of my displays, I do add a thin white line near the edge of filled circles as seen on the left to emulate one of the displays used within my model, which is seen above it with a brown background. My map doesn't technically use outlines because I removed the outlines between states but maintained the space in between them. This was intended to give the appearance of 48 separate fills side by side as opposed to a single object with borders and outlines. However, the map does still appear to use outlines to a certain extent. On the left are some icons within my model, and on the right are the icons used within my infographic. I tried to match the level of simplicity and realism used within my model, although their icons may be just a bit more detailed than mine. The silhouettes used within my model match completely with those used within my infographic, although I didn't create any icons modeled after the phones in my model, but these phones have a similar level of detail as the human icons. My model uses very simple and low-level detail graphics, and overall I would say my infographic matches this level of realism. The one element in my infographic that I would say stands out a bit is my map of the United States. I tried to find a very simple version of the US, but I still feel that the level of detail within this map is quite a bit higher than any piece of my model or the rest of my infographic. In general, most of the displays within my model carried a bit of weight, and I tried to match this throughout my infographic. However, there is one exception within my infographic that does seem a bit lighter than anywhere else in my model or infographic, and that was in my time display. I tried to thicken the line and make the precision points bigger, but hesitated to make them too thick or big because some of the precision seemed to be lost by doing this. Using a really thick line also appeared a bit oversimplified and less data-driven than I wanted the display to be. Now we will talk about visual hierarchy within my infographic. Visual hierarchy refers to the variation in visual prominence of elements in a display. This variance can be used to guide a reader's attention or convey importance. In my infographic, visual hierarchy comes primarily from the layout of my infographic, as well as size and positioning within each display. The shape of my infographic is tall and skinny, and nearly every section spans the width of the page. Because of this, readers naturally view my infographic from top to bottom. There are two nested sections, however, the header and the income and education sections, which I placed from left to right in order of importance, since readers typically read from left to right. Within each individual display, I typically used a large title to draw the viewer's attention. Then the rest of the display was laid out to read left to right from top to bottom. Within the display, I used color to draw attention to the graphic elements. Now we will talk about unity and variety within my infographic. Unity refers to the use of repeated visual elements like color, shape, size, and texture to create a sense of unity. Within my infographic, every section title uses black text and is always larger than the rest of the text within my display. All commentary within the display uses the same font and black color, and all numbers use the same font. Filled circles are used consistently within my infographic as well as filled human silhouettes. On top of this, the same blues, oranges, and grays are used within each display. Additionally, the size of each section within my displays are roughly about the same size besides the nested sections. This all creates unity as well. Variety refers to the use of different visual elements like color, shape, size, and texture to create a more interesting and dynamic visual. Within my infographic, I use a wide range of graphical elements like line charts, bar charts, and choropleth maps. I also use a variety of fonts for the section titles and a variety of sizes for different shapes and elements. Now we will talk about layout within my infographic. My infographic is laid out from top to bottom with 7 main sections in the body of the infographic. My infographic starts out with a nested header with the title on the left and an introductory paragraph on the right. This is followed by 5 sections, all spanning the width of the page. These sections are all relatively the same size, with the state section slightly larger than the other 4. Following these 5 sections is a nested section with 2 square sections placed beside each other, together spanning the width of the page. Following this, there is one more informational section and then a very short conclusion at the end. At the very bottom, my sources are listed in a small section. The layout of my infographic follows the layout of my model very closely, with one major exception. I added in one extra section spanning the width of the page to create space for all 5 visual potentials displays. Now we will talk about alignment within my infographic. Alignment refers to the arrangement of text and graphic elements so that they line up. For the most part, both my model and my infographic have all the text and graphic elements aligned with the left and right ends of the lines dividing each section. Like my model, the title is left justified, aligned on the left with the line below, and the introductory paragraph is left and right justified, aligned on the right with the line below. In this section, both the title and the annotation underneath are left justified, lining up with the lines above and below. The labels attached to the leading lines, however, are right justified. In this section, both the titles and the annotations are left justified, while the labels in the section on the left are aligned on the left, and the labels in the section on the right are centered. The elements within this section are also aligned with the dividing lines above and below. In these sections, both the title and the subtext are centered. For the displays on the right, the annotations for each ethnicity are left justified. Finally, here's my final infographic as well as my models. Thank you.